Up here in Sundown Bay. Early in the week, we had less water tides that were in here, lower tides that were happening. And so as the week progressed, we got water back a little bit each and every day. So as the week progressed, we got toward the end of the week, into the weekend, our water levels were back pretty much normal for this time of year without, some type of tidal movement that was pushing in or a front that made some blow some water out. So it was had to fish a little differently early in the week and back kind of normal fishing during the end of the week. But the day that we spent up here in Sundown, the water levels were pretty normal for the most part. You could fish right up there against the shoreline with not any problem. Fish, 50 yards out away from it, be a little bit deeper, but still a tremendous amount of bait working our system. Water temps have rebounded nicely. We're sitting in the mid 70s, creeping up to upper 70s as the day would progress, depending on how much sunshine it would get. And if you fish in Sundown and if you waded this area, it's kind of mushy. It's not terribly mushy, but some spots are. So we worked around that and all the inlets that go into the back lake mouths that dump out of there. You got shell that are on those corners. So we would find a few redfish that were kind of hanging out around those particular areas, and then pick out a one or a two thing of redfish that were up and down the shoreline. Plenty of trout, a lot of smaller trout that were stacked in here. I say stacked, they really weren't stacked in here, but there was a lot of trout, and we would catch trout in here, but they were all being at 13 to 15 range. Then every so often we'd pull one out that might be a 17 or an 18, but all the redfish were pretty good for the most part. They were 18 to 24 inch redfish that were scattered about. We find them in a single or a double, mainly around those mouths, those inlet mouths, especially toward the end of the week when we would fish this, or when we fish this, when that water level came back up, because those fish can get back in those areas. Once that water level comes up, they push with that tide. And so when they get the opportunity to get back in some areas that they typically have not been in a while, especially with more water in place, then you have better opportunity to find those fish. We'd wade up in some of the mouths, which is really mushy, so just be careful if you're going to wade that. It gets pretty mushy in some of those spots back in there, but we stayed more on the outside, working the middle end, worked back toward the shoreline, worked the grass line edge, and that's where we primarily found our fish. Again, it was much primarily around the majors and minor that were taking place. Now we're on the backside of the new moon. We're fixing to get back into the transition moon as we head toward the 1st of December. We'll be in a full moon in that first week. So the new moon was pretty productive for the most part. Again, not tremendous amount of numbers, but more quality fish than quantity, which was fine for the days that we were on the water. So it worked out quite well. We caught, like I say, we caught some better fish during that time frame. Using bigger baits, we were using a lot of the original size down south, the supermodel of the down south, the Pav lures. We were using the 5 and 6 inch rat tails that they have in various colors. The little softy is getting to be a little bit better and better bait to throw. Like I say, it very much mimics what a soft dine does and kind of how its action is. So there are a few differences if you're very proficient with the soft dine, and then of course if you pick up a Pav lure or little softy, you can see the differences on how they perform. They're very close, but there are a few little differences there. So I find that the little softy works a little bit better for me in my style and how I fish it. So if you're interested in trying one of those, pick some of those up, and or go to their webpage and look for them. But anyway, we would work these areas in here, just working that bait line, working on that grass line edge, all the way down to the very end of it. Like I say, early in the week, we would get off on the edge out here on the ICW because there's a little bit of room that you can work there and not have to worry about it too much. So that's kind of where our focus was on that. Do be aware, though, if you do have the barges that are coming through, they will push and pull water out of there. So it acts like a little bitty tsunami. But it also creates a little bit of current in there. So every time one would come by, we would notice The bite would pick up momentarily and then would die back off after that barge had gone by. So something just to take note for you, kind of in the future. If you do fish this particular area or somewhere where we got pretty much high barge traffic, something to kind of put in your arsenal there and just kind of take advantage of when you can. And just work down these edges that way. Continue to work down. We didn't go tremendous far, but of course, if you've been in Sundown, it's a pretty good little stretch of water, so there's a lot of area to work. So we're just kind of hopscotching along there, if you will, leapfrogging it, and just kind of working along the edges there primarily. Again, color-wise, the selection, it really based it on what our water clarity was. If we had stained water, we were throwing something just a little bit darker. If it was clear, depending on the day it was, we'd throw something a little bit more translucent, or maybe translucent belly, a little bit more solid back. And that pattern seemed to hold pretty well for us for the most part. But that's where we would find and locate our fish with those particular flavors or that style flavor in that time frame, or with that new moon being in place. The bigger baits were more productive for us this past week. Back here on the super flats again, early in the week, lower tides were in play. We got more water back as the week progressed, so we kind of send up here middle of the week, toward the end of the week. Work the super flats, get a little bit tighter to the shoreline. A lot of grass, a lot of potholes, a lot of opportunity that presented itself to us on this particular stretch of water. Which I'm sure a lot of you have fished the super flats before, so it's a long stretch of water, and it gives you a lot of different opportunity and with looks and structure and all that. Again, our water temps have rebounded nicely into the mid to upper 70s, depending on the day. We haven't had that one significant cold front that really, if we had a little small one, I think a couple of Sundays ago, it had one that blew in there and it changed our water temps there for about 10 degrees for 2 or 3 days, and then that's where it's just continually come back up temperature-wise. So back to wet wading these areas like that, fishing the potholes, fishing the grass line edges, and that's where these fish are hanging. A lot of the fish that we were catching were hanging off these potholes, off the little bit deeper edge. You get out here on this point, you can take it out there a little bit ways, and then just come back around on a big grass flat that's out here. We found some better trout in this particular area. We found some better redfish in this particular, but again, not great numbers. A lot of small ones, and that's where our patience had to come into play. We would catch a 19 to a 21-inch trout in a couple of these areas that were kind of hanging off these potholes and on top of that grass after it had warmed up just a hair. And when I say warm up, I'm talking about, we start our day out 72, 73, and then we'd get up around 75, 76. So that's a pretty important number-wise for those fish that they, 1 or 2 degree difference makes a big deal for them. So we would just work these edges like that. Again, a lot of smaller trout were stacked in there in these areas, and you had to kind of wade through those before you find your better fish, but we would. And then, of course, some redfish that were cruising on top of that grass flat up there, just kind of on the edges of those little potholes and off the little drop edges that are out here on this around as you come around this super flat area. And just kind of work down that and just covering that grass like that. So again, same flavors. We were throwing the bigger baits. Didn't throw the burner shad very much unless we really just got into a lull for a while. And then I just kind of downsized the bait, find fish again with it, and then go back to the bigger bait. And that's when we would catch more quality fish, was with that bigger bait. That's what they were eating, and that's what they were wanting. Again, in the Pav lures, in the 5 and 6 inch bait, the supermodel in the down south, and the original size, the little softy, double D. We would work, if we got into that waist deep, crotch deep water, I'd tie that double D on there and just kind of work that, because there's still a lot of floating grass that's going on. It's happening. So topwater bait will be okay every once in a while, but you'd still catch a lot of grass in particular areas, especially over these big grass flats that are up here. A lot of that floating grass is still out and about. So once you'd kind of get clogged up with that, and we get back into our plastics and throw those. Again, 16th ounce jig head, just working those in and around the potholes, working them off the drop edges, and that's where we could find our baits. So the majors and the minors were pretty good to us for the most part, and our lulls would come in between that time frame. So that's when we kind of downsize, go back to a smaller bait. I think the burner shad and the little softies during that time frame did the best for us for the most part. None of the bigger baits that I recall were really that great. So anyhow, that was our main goal. That was our tactic in which we attacked these particular areas, and that's what we would do, and that's how our production would go. So we would find those fish in those particular areas. Shell Point all the way down to Turtle Pen, one of my favorite areas to really work. We fished this later in the week, especially with the water levels coming back. Turtle Pen on any given day can be pretty good. Some days it can be better than others. But when you got less water in there, it makes it a little bit more difficult to fish. But at the same time, when you got more water in there, you can have pretty prolific days, especially on the back shoreline. Again, I've talked about these little back lake mouths in here that are super soft. Of course, we had to kind of duck and dodge duck hunters one day. But getting back here on this back shoreline and just working this all the way up into Copano Creek, all this area back here to the back lake. That's why we kind of targeted it toward the end of the week, because we knew, well, we didn't know we were going to have more water, but we gained more water back each day. And I think it was, I don't know, Friday, maybe Saturday, we would work back in these areas here with that more water and just kind of work that creek down that edge. Wind set up really good for us, and you got a nice little flat, little sand flat. Got a little grass mixed in there with it. And we found some redfish that were hanging out here on this edge of that, fishing that, caught those, and then, of course, some scattered trout. Now, the trout that we caught were hanging more in this deeper water in the creek area. We didn't go any further than this mouth that comes back into this back lake and just kind of fished that up and down. But, of course, if you've been in Turtle Pen, it's got those two white pipes that's marking that broken down duck blind. And so you kind of worked out it around that area out there and found some a little bit better fish that were hanging out in that tad bit deeper water. It's very subtle difference, but it was there. You got plenty of grass, soft enough bottom. Again, this is another one of the areas when it gets really cold. When I say really cold, you get, low 60s, high 50s. It's a really good area to target because of the type of structure that's in there. But fish hold in there pretty much year-round for the most part, depending on, again, on any given day. You can find fish back in that. And that's kind of worked that. And then work down here all the way out to the point. You got some different little areas that are back in there. You got some scattered potholes. You got pretty good grass. A little bit more hard pack on that side based on whatever wind that you've got, depending on how you're going to fish it, either into the shore or out to the bayside. So whatever the wind was the day that we fished it, that's how we approached it and attacked that. Again, same baits. Water clarity really dictated our bait color. Being in that new moon phase, we really try to target some better fish that were in there. And we caught a few, didn't catch a lot. A lot of little ones in the systems, no matter what estuary you're fishing in, catching a lot of those 13 to 15s that are in there. Still fun, no matter what. So we just kind of worked around these areas here. So anyhow, we're fixing to be in those transition days coming, so make sure you adjust your box accordingly. And I also want to extend a happy Thanksgiving to everybody this upcoming week. Hope y'all have a great day. If you get the opportunity to get to fish this upcoming week, have a lot of fun out there, but most importantly, be safe.